What really kind of lands for me, what you're saying there, is it's through personal, real, actual human connections that the healing can happen. It's from actually
Yes.
physically experiencing and seeing the way that people are relating to each other. Father Hans Jacobsy, who I talk to quite often about this kind of subject, he talks about what's traumatized or what's broken in relationship needs to be healed in relationship. And so he's also a
Mhm.
priest. And so he talks about like God is the source of these things, but our experience of God is generally through other people that we're organically connected to and naturally connected to. And so when we're able to have relationships, and this is the idea of a church. Hi, Dad. Episode number
Uh,
6, Father and Son. Nice to see you again.
Paul and you.
Great.
Good.
So our last conversation we had was about the father wound, and it definitely
Mhm.
seems like a topic that a lot of people who are listening and watching feel is relevant and speaking into their lives. I think it's something that every single man has to a certain extent. No one has a perfect father, and so we adapt or adopt various strategies to cope with that in our childhood. And then those get played out in our life. And then sometimes as an adult, we get to see things more clearly and to get over them. And
Yeah, sometimes we get stuck in a rut and then we can't get out of it. So it's
yeah,
also something that happens. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think any man who's stuck in a rut, a lot of the time, it's going to be related to his relationship with his father, and the
Yeah.
way that things come
Okay.
together. I think it can be also, there's also like something like the mother wound, and I think that's a whole other kettle of fish, which also
Yeah. Yeah.
is sometimes tougher. But right
Just as
now, I
real, but
think
tough.
our biggest challenge seems to be more fathers and fatherhood,
Fathers.
and that's at least what a lot of people are missing. So one person actually commented on the video that we made last episode, which I thought was really relevant, and so I thought I'd just read it up here so we can share because I think this captures actually how a lot of other people feel. The most common reaction actually I've also heard from speaking to people, and so that's here. It says. This is John Music. I envy this journey you're on with your father. My father wound goes deep, and I'm not sure if I can resolve it because my father is angry and drunk on the 24-hour news cycle. He's reached the point of truly unapproachable, every aspect of his being having to do with either hating Trump or Elon, the current source of all of his problems. It's horrible. His grandkids don't know him, and he's blinded by what I can only imagine a hatred of himself that goes so deep that he doesn't think he's worthy to climb out. That sounds tough. And I think it's just far more common as well than what we realize that men are experiencing in the relationship with their fathers. Uh, that there's a gap, a space where they're unable to actually reach over and communicate and establish a communication.
Not an easy one at all. Especially if there's if the father is locked into a particular situation where he's going around in circles, seemingly in this case himself.
Yeah.
So to get him out of that so that he can communicate and talk is not going to be a straightforward thing. Um, I suppose one of the things that particularly spoke to me was an interaction with another family, and in this case, mom's family. When I met her, started courting her, and I saw the dynamic in their family, which was very, very different to the dynamic that was in my family, and that began to help me to reassess, help me to look at things differently, helped me to see that okay, no dads are perfect, and
Mhm.
I must say my father-in-law was a very strong man, very capable man, very decisive sort of a man, and I admired that, saw that as somebody who was able to get things done. But he was also a loving, caring, compassionate man, and that combination I saw very differently. And I think the whole dynamic in the home and that of course involves both father and mother, was very
Mhm.
different in that there was an open opportunity for everyone to communicate. And that's something that I kind of felt was lacking in my home and growing up. And I felt that I could do something about that. I could reach out. I could get my father into different situations where he would be perhaps more relaxed, where he would get out of his box, out of his routine. Because he, in his older life, he was very much just going to work, coming home, and almost doing nothing. So here's a man whose father's locked into the news, and the news is bugging him and getting him hyped up. My dad wasn't into the news at all, but he was just in his little cocoon and in his little rut. So I made a point of inviting him to come to us, to come and visit, to get him out of it, to get him into. So, like, we went on holiday, we went to the mountains, to the Berg. So it wasn't my home as such on this particular occasion. We made a point of booking a holiday place and inviting him to come and join us. And that worked wonders for, just the opportunity to open up and for him to connect with his grandchildren. Now, I'm sure you would probably say today that was a very minor connection, but it was the beginning of opening a door.
Yeah. I remember Opa's a really quiet man, a very withdrawn man. So my strongest recollection is, I mentioned in the last episode when he cried when we arrived at his home. But other than that, all I can think of is like one time when we were changing channels on his television, and then he came and said like, "Oh, you're not allowed to touch the remote control," or something like that. He didn't want us touching his remote control of the TV. And so we so I guess we're a little bit scared of him, but kind of like, didn't really have any real connection. So yeah, I guess, Dad, I mean, in many ways, there's this chain of inherited pain and suffering and trauma that's going from generation to generation. A lot of guys I've spoken to have spoken about like war trauma, their fathers or their great grandfathers, their grandfathers being involved in war and shutting down emotionally, being unable to communicate and express and be able to have that proper human connection because of the pain that they've suffered and just needing to kind of close down their feelings because it's too much. I think the terrible things that that men go through in war, and unfortunately that's a reality again in Europe today, is that war is coming back. So if you were to point towards like some of the things you've mentioned, like seeing another family, what do you think was it that made you open to that experience? That you were able to kind of in really heal that generational trauma, I think, and stop the kind of continuance of at least a large part of the pain that had been passed down.
So what very much comes into play with this is what I would call a Christian worldview, where as a young man, I was, neither here nor there as far as my sort of Christian life was concerned. I was supposed to be one, but I didn't live it, and came about a whole transformation in my life, which began by actually meeting someone else and again seeing something in their home that was very different to my home. And that's I saw there was an understanding.
Not mom you're talking about now, somebody else.
Not mom, was the head girl of our school, invited me one day to come and visit. And seeing that openness in the home, and the reason they gave for what was going on was because God was in their life, and they were able to relate to that. And there was also a father who had passed away, so there was no father in the home. But now there was an older brother, and just the whole dynamic of seeing that there is a spiritual father that is caring and loving and able to work things out in their lives made me stop and reassess, where am I? What is my relationship like? And so I began to understand God as a loving father who is nevertheless sure of what he's doing and where he's going, and wanting to invite us to be a part of that.
Sorry for interrupting. If you're finding any value from this conversation, then please go and check out on our website, manifesto.com. We have a network of online groups with men who are working through these kinds of challenges and growing to be the best men that they can be. So back to the conversation.
My father wasn't particularly inviting me to be a part of what he was doing, but I began to feel that as a son, that was a responsibility that I could begin to work with. And so, as I said, then saw it in this family, saw it in mom's family, began to see it in many other families, and then, made an effort. And it's a difficult thing to kind of express, because you can't just get a man out of what he's in, especially if he's an older man and he's been in that for many, many years.
What really kind of lands for me, what you're saying there, is it's through personal, real, actual human connections that the healing can happen. It's from actually physically experiencing and seeing the way that people are relating to each other. Father Hans Jacobsy, who I talk to quite often about this kind of subject, he talks about what's traumatized or what's broken in relationship needs to be healed in relationship. And so he's also a priest, and so he talks about like God is the source of these things, but our experience of God is generally through other people that we're organically connected to and naturally connected to. And so when we're able to have relationships, and this is the idea of a church, not all churches function this way, of course, right? Not everybody's able to be able to, but if you enter the church with this understanding, then you can realize that this is the place where you're supposed to learn how to love other human beings with all of their weird, strange difficulties and all that kind of stuff that they have, of course.
And you might not enter with that understanding, but as you enter and you begin to see, then that understanding grows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly what happened with me. I can't say I entered with that understanding, but as I was part of the community, as I began to see the interaction between people and the care, it made me realize I could pass that on to my dad, and I could draw him out of the little box that he found himself in. And it took a very, very long time, but little bit by little bit of inviting him here, inviting him there. Now having married mum, inviting him to become whenever we had family things. Not whenever, because we were very far apart. He was in Johannesburg, I was in Durban, but nevertheless to draw him into that family so that that could rub off, if you like. And it's kind of that idea of just try and get the man out of the rut that he's in small ways. Don't expect a big jump, but little bit by little bit, draw him into something that he can begin to relate to.
Yeah. And then I think that there's a need to drop at least certainly not the expectation, but also
Yeah.
sometimes I would even go so far as to say the ambition to change your father, to save your father, something like that. Like, we certainly can't teach our fathers anything if we try, I think. I know I've tried to teach you, like, so you're a Protestant, I'm an Orthodox Christian. So I've tried to kind of like bridge that topic. And I found like, when I try and do it, I can feel like the balance isn't right. There's something that isn't completely right there. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? That there is a hierarchical, established, natural difference where, scripture teaches you, like, respect your father. And so you're not there to challenge or to teach your father.
Yeah. And it's not easy if your father is doing something that you really find that you can't respect. Then that becomes more difficult. But to respect the man for who he is, and know that he's got faults, and accept those faults, and not try and fix the faults, rather try and draw the man into having communion, draw the man into conversation, draw the man into showing him care and love. And that doesn't mean that you've got to be all slobbery and give him a hug and kiss and whatever the case might be, but just to keep the door open for communication. Mm-hmm. So I think what you expressed last time too was that walk in the berg that we had, me leaving the door open for you to communicate, was a step in the right direction of building that relationship. You couldn't convince me of what it was that you were saying, but I was willing to listen to what you had to say. So the reverse is also true. If a son is willing to listen to his father and hear his heart, what is it that's aggravating this man? Why is he so angry? What's bugging him? Without actually saying to him, why are you so angry? Just opening the door for conversation. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is something that is a way of drawing the father out and healing that father wound.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to to tie up that conversation, Dad. Yeah.
So trust that that's helpful for somebody to just begin to nibble away at it.
Yeah, and thanks to John for the comment. And yeah, I think it's great to have a little bit of a conversation here. So if there's anybody else that has thoughts, questions, reflections that they can add to our conversations, and that's really useful. And I'll just drop in here as well then. I'm running a network of men's groups online called Manifesto Core. My dad's in one of the groups, actually. I'm not on so many of the groups. I'm in one of the groups. But it's basically guys who are talking together about what they're doing with their lives, supporting each other. And I'd go so far as to say, like, healing these father wounds through showing each other a masculine iron sharpens iron type of love. It's like a paternal love, of which kind of doesn't just accept everything exactly the way it is, but has some expectations, but it's really there to support and lift up as well, and to provide nourishment. We can do that as men as well. We can also provide, like, the attention to pain and hurt, but in the same way expecting men to, like, you need to be a man, you need to stand on your own feet as well.
Absolutely. With me, with my army training, as real transformation from being a boy to being a man. And it was just that camaraderie, men doing things together. And what I found with the group that I'm in, the men are very different. They've got very different perspectives and ideas. We listen to each other, we stand by each other, and we're a group of men who get things done together. And that's a tremendous help and helps with the healing of those wounds.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks
Great
very
stuff.
much, Dad.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Love you lots. Take care.